Nice, thank you very much for joining. I don't have slides today, but I brought some notes, usually, a thin one, because I wrote a book about the praxeology of privacy. My first love was Austrian economics, and I've studied a whole bunch since I was quite young. And then later, I discovered the cypherpunks and started studying all of the crazy tech and magic that we can build. And I think both schools of thoughts, both traditions, are first of all incredibly valuable and incredibly accurate, very, very useful, but even more so that they tremendously benefit from each other. And I think there's a under usage of these two traditions in combination. Like if you look back to, Mises Institute in like 2010, 2012, most articles were highly critical of Bitcoin, because they fundamentally didn't understand it, right? And that cost a lot of Austrians a lot of money. And so I guess I'm kind of here to hopefully fix that mistake and get the Austrians back into the board of the cypherpunks, right? So in the second part of this book, I'm talking a lot about, the magic of encryption, signatures, zero-knowledge proofs, private computations, and then how we can put that all together in an actual unstoppable decentralized marketplace that brings these ideas of Mises, Rothbard, etc., into an unstoppable shape where, they cannot be stopped. So I won't be talking much today about this because I presume you all know most of this, so I would be preaching to the choir. Plus, it wouldn't be much on brand of the conference anyway. So what I'll be talking about more is the actual praxeology of privacy. Not the implementation, but the theory of it. And really go a bit deep into what praxeology actually is and what it means, and specifically how it applies to the projects of the cypherpunks and the privacy thereof. I will be rambling until they kick me out. I don't even see a timer. So I don't think there will be questions at the end, but we'll just make questions during. Raise your hand, feel free to interrupt me at any time. Tell me if I'm stupid or if I should explain something a bit more. There we go. What is praxeology? That's a great way to start. Praxeology literally means the logic of human action. Right? It's a term, it wasn't originally coined by Mises. I keep forgetting the name of the guy who actually came up with it. He wrote it with an I, not the Y at the end. So basically it is the science of how we can think about the consequences of human action. Right? If you think about psychology, that answers the question of why do humans act the way that they do? Praxeology is about after they've done the action, what is the consequence going forward? That's kind of how I separate these two sciences, and it's incredibly valuable. It comes here from Vienna, didn't start with Mises, it started with Karl Menger. He came up with the thought that value is not in the thing itself, it's in the heart and minds of individual, right? Subjective value. And that it's marginal, right? That the same good has different value to you depending on how many other goods you have. If you're starving and you have one ribeye, that ribeye saves your life. If you have 10 ribeyes, the 11th, you're probably not going to eat it anyway. So it decreases in value. It's marginal with decrease with each additional unit. Right? These were the two main things that Menger identified. Later, we had Eugen van Böhmberg. He introduced time preference, which explained a lot about interest rates and started to go deeper into the monetary theory. And then finally, their students was Mises, Ludwig von Mises. And he coined the term praxeology, and he made it a rigorous methodology. There was a fantastic Methodenstreit, a disagreement or dispute over methodology here in Vienna, roughly around the turn between the 18th and 19th century, where it was about, okay, how do we actually look at economics? Right? And other sciences, like what is the proper methodology to think about these problems? And so Mises said that we have to have a priori axiomatic science. Right? We shouldn't just look at historical examples of how humans behaved, how cultures and societies grew in the past. Right? That's a collectivist thinking. But collectives don't act, they don't produce anything. It's the individuals that make all of the choices. So that was the first difference. And then we cannot look at the past because the present is different and the future is even more uncertain. So what might be adequate in the past might not be proper today in a concrete example. So ultimately, he started with the axiom of action. Right? That was a self-evident truth that basically says that humans perceive uneasiness. Humans have problems, in other words, and then humans have resources available, goods, etc., that they can allocate in order to alleviate their ends, or to alleviate their problems or achieve their ends, right? So we have problems, we have goods or means, and then we have a possible future where we can allocate these means in a variety of different ways to try to solve our problems. Right? That's where the entrepreneurial judgment comes in, of we're unsure what problems we'll have in the future, right? We're unsure if the goods that were available, which of these would best solve them, and how we have to apply them to make sure that our problems are solved. Right? So that is ultimately what action is about, right? To act in uncertainty. An incredibly powerful axiom to start with, because you cannot refute it. It's self-evident. Right? To say that I am not acting, I'm not purposefully behaving to solve my problems, right, is an act in itself. I'm saying that I don't have a problem, but I'm trying to convince you that I'm not acting. That's the problem I'm trying to solve. I'm allocating my resources, my body, my vocal cords, my time, the space I'm standing on, to convey you that fact, but which means this proves it's a performative contradiction, as Hoppe later termed it. Fantastically powerful starting point to really think about economics, and something that you cannot deny. That's why it's a solid ground to stand on. And out of this one axiom, with a couple others, we can deduce a whole bunch of the praxeological realm, specifically economics, right? So the study of goods and services. Catalactics, the study of trade specifically. Right? We can come to conclusions like a minimum wage leads to unemployment. It's a very praxeological sentence to say, and it's true. If we put a maximum price on something, then some merchants will no longer be able to provide the service because it's unprofitable for them. They would only be profitable if they can charge a higher service, and so they will reduce their supply from the market, and then there will be a mismatch of too much supply, not enough, too much demand, not enough supply, and so people will not be able to get a job. Same with the rent control that unfortunately Vienna is very famous for, and that's why they have so many housing problems. They should remove the maximum rent prices, etc., so that entrepreneurs are incentivized to build. Unfortunately, the socialist nightmare that is here doesn't quite do that. I hope they learn. But so what's very important, and Mises was particular on this, was that we have to stay value-free, wertfrei. We can make statements of the consequences of actions, like it leads to unemployment. We cannot say that that's a good thing or a bad thing, purely based on the axiom of action. Right? It is a deductive science, not an ethical claim. So it's a normative, not a normative claim. And that was the case, I believe, for quite many decades, until the second axiom was introduced, that I'm a big fan of, and that is the axiom of argumentation by Hans Hermann Hoppe. He has found another performative contradiction from which you can deduce the property rights, ultimately, in a logical sense. So his premise is that to argue is to control your bodily resources in order to convince a other member of the argument of the truth. And we have the capability to recognize truth. And if we presume that, then this means in order to enter into an argument, you are presupposing that you have the bodily right in yourself and that you have self-ownership in yourself. If someone else would control your mind and your vocal cords, and if you would not have exclusive self-ownership over your body, you could not perform an argument, because the other person would be arguing with himself, and that's not really an argument. Right? To have an honest debate, you need to grant to yourself and to the other person full autonomy in their mind and speech and body and the ground they stand on. Right? So in its first conclusion is that self-ownership of the body is a requirement if we want to engage in argumentation. And since that cannot be refuted, again, it would be a performative contradiction, we can then have a deductive claim that self-ownership is a right. That's now a normative claim, right? It's you ought to have self-ownership, so to say. We can extend that further to property rights. In order to perform an argument, you need to control and own the ground that you stand on. You need to own the clothing that you wear. You need to own the food that sustains you throughout the argument, right? The water to nourish you, and so on. So with this, again, we have a performative contradiction that you cannot claim that the other person does not own his ground, his clothes, his food, etc., in order to be part of that argument. From that now, we can deduce that property right is a good thing. And we should have property rights and we should defend them. I think a very, very powerful additional axiom to introduce. It's a little bit contested. In the book I go through some of these contestations. I still think it holds true, and it's incredibly useful and helps us to have a strong ground in self-ownership is a good thing, and we should defend it. But then that kind of stopped in the Austrian tradition, and later a cypherpunk, and also Austrian, Eric Voskuil introduced a new axiom that I think is essential to analyze systems like Bitcoin or cryptography. And that is the axiom of resistance. Right? Systems can be designed to resist control. And that is an important assumption to make when you think about systems like Bitcoin. If you don't think that people can resist the government, then Bitcoin does not make sense to you. One of the #1 critiques of Bitcoin has always been, oh, the government is just going to ban it. And yes, if you follow the rules of the government and the government bans it, then Bitcoin doesn't work. Right? You'll have to give up your private keys, we'll have to change our nodes to have infinite inflation, and so on, and we'll have to send transactions to them when they demand. So yeah, the Bitcoin system breaks if we don't have the axiom of resistance. But that's where the cypherpunks come in. Right? The cypherpunks don't ask for permission. The cypherpunks just write code, they deploy the code, they use the code. And without this assumption, any secure system would fail. Imagine you have a chunk of gold and you want to protect it. So you get a big metal box to put the piece of gold into the box. And then you lock it, you have a key, you protect the key. You get a guy, big guy, with a gun standing in front of it. You build a strong wall around it, maybe a tank, some missiles, let's see, drones, right? Like you go all out, you have incredibly effective technology of preventing an attacker to get to the gold. But now the attacker comes and says, hello, I would like to take your gold. Please open the door. And you're like, yeah, sure. Come along, I'll unlock it for you, there it is, right? You're not performing resistance. Then any of these technologies that you've applied, that you've built, that you've created, that you've paid for, are absolutely useless. Right? Any secure system requires resistance against the adversary. And many people don't acknowledge this assumption. That's why, my current thought that PayPal is totally fine and like we don't need Bitcoin. A PayPal-like system is okay because, well, like the government is good. We don't have to resist them. So we don't need to build the tools that can resist the government. Running a full node isn't important. Right? Running a full node is exactly how we resist an attacker. By verifying the money supply, right? By validating scripts, by having self-custody of our keys. Right? These are the tools that we have to reduce the cost of resistance. Because that's the other thing, resistance does not come for free. Resistance is costly, sometimes deadly. And so the idea of the cypherpunks, the strategy of the cypherpunks, is to introduce a cost asymmetry. We want to reduce the cost of defense, the cost of resistance, and simultaneously we want to increase the cost of attack and make it more expensive to attack the system. And that has an interesting aspect to it that's well discussed in Rahim's paper, The Praxeology of Violence. Because thieves are entrepreneurs too. Right? They have problems, they want to get your Bitcoin. they have tools, means available, computer to hack you with, a $5 wrench, etc. And now they want to allocate these means in order to achieve their ends, to get your Bitcoin. And if they have to apply more means than the goods that they try to steal, right? If it costs them more than the amount of money that they can loot, then they're not profitable. With any attempted heist, they would have less money at the end than before. And so attackers are entrepreneurs too. And they can be profitable, which they of course try to be, and they can make a loss. And if we have this asymmetry where the cost of attack is extremely expensive, then that means that a larger amount of loot will be protected or protectable. Right? If it costs you always, 100 Bitcoin to try to brute force a key, bad example, but let's stick with it, then anything less than 99 Bitcoin is safe. Right? Quantum attackers, let's say, right? The quantum attackers will go for the keys of Binance that are all on a reused address, hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, because that's profitable. But if you have like 0.1 Bitcoin on a UTXO, that will be safe for a long time until the cost of attack has sufficiently decreased. So that's the one side of the asymmetry. Then we have the other side of the asymmetry, which is that the cost of defense should be decreased. Right? If it is extremely expensive to protect your Bitcoin, let's say a hardware wallet would cost 10 Bitcoin, then it doesn't make sense to buy a hardware wallet if you want to protect 1 Bitcoin. If the cost of defense is expensive, we're excluding people who can afford the defense. And part of the cypherpunk strategy is to decrease that cost of defense, which means we can protect more people, which also means we can increase our anonymity set. Right? Is that a question or a stretch? That's a stretch. Again, questions, shoot them out. So again, we have the cost of attack, the cost of defense. Strategy of the cypherpunks is to reduce this asymmetry in favor of the defender, such that we can make resistance cheaper and even profitable. If you think about it, that there is a chance that you are going to get attacked and you would lose 10 Bitcoin. And if you can spend 0.1 Bitcoin to protect yourself against the potential loss of 10 Bitcoin, then that's a very profitable thing to do. So increasing the profitability of defense is very valuable. And that's where the cypherpunk tools ultimately come in. And so these are the 3 axioms that I think you need to understand to really value the mission of the cypherpunks. Right? We need to first understand with the action axiom that theft makes us all poor. That's ultimately the gist of Austrian economics. Just don't steal because it makes everyone worse off. Then we need to have the argumentation axiom, to have the normative claim of you have the right to defend yourself. Right? And you do not have the right to steal from others. It goes both ways. And then we need to have the axiom of resistance on the strategic point on how do we actually make the theft unprofitable. How do we protect ourselves such that everyone can use these protections. Right? And this cost, by the way, is not just a monetary cost. It's also, for example, the cost of time required to learn to use the system properly. If it's a really complicated system, then you need to spend hours in order to use it securely, and that means that the cost is higher. A great paper on this specifically is Anonymity Loves Company by the Tor people, early 2000s, where they're basically saying that if users have to educate themselves in order to understand the system and make the correct choices, like which signature or encryption algorithm to use, the key size and so on, how long the staggering between packets is and so on, then they will either have to spend a whole bunch of time to learn to do it properly, and most likely they will use it in an insecure way, because they haven't fully understood it. Right? And that means if we solve the problem at the protocol layer, really high up in the stack, then we make it more secure, more practical for a larger amount of people who don't have the time or don't want to learn these details. Right? So it's on us, the builders, to make sure that we have good technology that protects users by default. And again, that's part of the cypherpunk vision of make privacy and security the default usage of the software and of the tools. If we have that, then we have the ability to protect more people than otherwise, because the cost of defense has been decreased substantially. Right? So there are then a couple more aspects here. I think property ultimately requires scarcity. And this is something that the cypherpunks got way earlier than the Austrians. Cypherpunks have been building free open source software since forever. Right? And really embrace that aspect that the developer does not own the code. The developer has spent time to create the code. The developer owns the computer that he wrote the code on, and maybe the computer that's hosting it, but he does not own the pattern of the bits and bytes that make up the program. Right? Information is non-scarce. It's non-rivalrous. Right? Which means that there is no reason that we need to allocate it carefully. If we have a scarce good, like the ribeye, then if I eat it, you cannot eat it. And also, if I eat it today, I cannot eat it tomorrow. So there is a one-time allocation for the use of any scarce resource, specifically consumption goods, right? And even if it's a production good, the machine, the 3D printer, can either print this type of good or the other type of good at the same time. One machine cannot perform two different tasks at the same time. So that means we have to allocate our scarce resources. There's the potential of conflict of who can control those scarce resources. And we need a way to settle that dispute. And that's where property rights come in. That's the reason why property rights exist, is because it is the most efficient way to allocate our scarce resources and to remove and minimize that conflict. Because it's clear that the homesteader, right, the person who created the good, has the best title to being the owner of that good. So if you build the cabin in the woods, and nobody was there before, and you cut the trees and made the logs and built the house, it's yours. Who else would own it? The collective? Right? Then you have to ask everyone on the entire planet if you can walk into the house and use it. That doesn't work. We just all starve. Right? If it's the priest class over there who we've voted to have all the power over us, then it's not like a balanced thing, right? There's different rules for these guys compared to us. That's not a proper ethical claim. So homesteading is the only proper way that we can allocate initially unowned resources. And then the second way that we can allocate these resources is via contracts. Right? If you've built it, you can decide to give it to someone else, contractually, which just means consensually. Right? That you agree and the person who receives it agrees. It's also important. And here you can do that for whatever reason. You can gift it out of the goodness of your heart. Right? You can barter it for some other good or service, or you can sell it for a money. Right? A couple different ways that you can contractually move the good from your ownership to the other ownership. I'll repeat.
On the topic of homesteading, it sounds like you were saying information is free, code is free. That's the point. How would you say, can you handle homesteading on aggregated information like AI does? So where would you say that this is a property claim for a highly trained AI to say it's homesteaded on top of information?
No, I don't think so. I think the AI is just bits and bytes, right? A large file, ultimately, and a program where you have inputs and the program and it produces outputs. That's just a pattern, right? And it's non-rivalrousness. Like you can download, I don't know, Kimi 2.6 or DeepSeek or whatever, and you can download it and you can download it and everyone can download it. So there is no rivalrousness over who can use the model in and of itself at any given time. What is rivalrousness is the compute that it's running on. Right? If you have a GPU and you're right now vibing hard, then I cannot vibe unless we get a bigger GPU. And that's the scarce resource. And the other scarce resource is the time of the engineers and researchers to come up with the thoughts and the ideas of how this algorithm ultimately gets to be created. So the time to build a software program is scarce, and you own your body, right? So that you can choose how to allocate your time. You might either do it for your own project, or you might hire it out for a service so that other people can control your attention and your skill for a given amount of time. But ultimately, the end result is a non-scarce information, right? That in it of itself cannot be stolen. Because to steal something means that the other person cannot have access to it anymore. But I can copy it, but copying is not stealing, right? Fundamentally, it's not, right? Okay, so yeah, scarcity is, I think, the root of property. It's a very Kinsella argument against intellectual property, fantastic book. And yeah, so next up then is exchange theory, right? Why do people trade? If the value would be in the good itself, right, then why would I trade a couple loaves of bread for a steak? Because at the point of exchange, they would probably be, they are the same price, right? So they would be the same value for things. That's, the root mistake that was committed for centuries, millennia, especially by Adam Smith, and then later propagated by Karl Marx, who just pointed out the flaws of Adam Smith's theory and drew it to its natural conclusion that trade is exploitative. Because if it's the same value, then someone wins while the other loses. But that's fundamentally flawed. Value is not in the good itself. Value is in the minds and hearts of individuals. And the reason why we trade is because I prefer steak and you prefer bread. And I have the bread and you have the steak. So we have a certain set of internal valuation, and after the trade, we're better off than before, both of us. Value is created with trade. It's not destroyed, and it's not staying equal. Humans are value-making machines. We can make value out of nothing. Right? Just by helping each other and by trading, we increase the amount of value perceived in society. That's incredible. And that's why trade is so beautiful, and that's why trade makes us all so rich. Because with every trade, we get a little bit richer. And if all of us keep trading for decades, centuries, then we all of a sudden get really, really rich. Right? You see here, Vienna used to be quite rich because they did a lot of trade, among other things. Right? They also did a lot of stealing. and that's the problem with theft. Right? If it's non-consensual, if I have the steak, and I really like steak, and now you hit me with a $5 wrench and take my steak away, maybe you replace it with bread, But I don't like bread. I want my steak. So now all of a sudden I'm worse off. Right? And yes, you got the thing that you valued more, but I didn't. And that's why I didn't consent to the trade in the first place. That's why I needed to apply force and coercion to get me to hand over the goods. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. And that's why theft is bad. It decreases the valuation of the market. And that's also bad for the thief, by the way. Thieves are very irrational because you need other people, right? You can do nothing by yourself. Pencil, right? The most humble of simple things, right? Try to produce me alone by yourself. Good fucking luck, right? Write a piece of code without any dependencies. Try it. It's impossible, right? Especially with software. It's way too complicated. Are you going to go all the way to like assembly and the firmware, and are you going to produce your own computer chips as well? Like, hand chisel the transistors? Good luck. It's impossible. We need others to be prosperous ourselves. And so if you keep stealing from others, you will be worse off. You can test that out, by the way, very, very easily. Make it a mission for one day to steal from everyone you meet. And see how you feel after, and if you're better off after that one day than you were before. Trust me, you won't. So trade is beautiful, right? Because we can help each other solve the problems that we couldn't solve by ourselves. And we can specialize, which is another fantastic thing. If you try to do everything yourself, you won't be good at anything in particular. If instead you focus on the thing that you are marginally best at compared to yourself, and then you trade with the others who do the same, the entire economy and society and you individually will increase in prosperity tremendously. Right? And the cool thing is, even if there's other people who are better than you in all the things that you can do, a super genius, an artificial intelligence robot, right? They're better at whatever task that you could possibly do, right? The genius and the retard. There's still value in trade between these people. Because if the genius has to do the thing that he's less good at, cooking, for example, right? He's a better brain surgeon than a cook. If he has to cook, he cannot fix the brains. And so he has to perform a task that will create less value than the task that he is best at. And if you're a retard and you're worse at cooking and worse at a brain surgeon than the other guy, but you're better at cooking than being a brain surgeon, then you focus on cooking and you help the other guy by focusing on the thing that is most important to him, the brain surgery. The food that he might get is maybe not as excellent as if he would have cooked it himself, but at least he's gotten much more value out of focusing on the thing that he is best at. That's the comparative advantage. Ricardo, I think, came up with that. Like, incredible, right? All the people who are afraid of artificial intelligence and, like, you know, being no longer the smartest the smartest species on the planet. Like, you were never the smartest person of humanity to begin with, and still you made it, you know. And the same will be the case for us as a species entirely. Like, I hope we'll find something that's even smarter than us, and that can perform even better than us in all of these aspects. Then we can trade with them, and we can do the things that they're not as great at compared to themselves, and we'll do the things that we're best at compared to us, and we'll get incredibly prosperous. Right? Trade benefits everyone, and that's why we do it. So, but why do we trade, right? Why do we need this? It's because that we need to consume, ultimately, right? The consumption is to destroy a scarce resource such that it solves our problems. Again, I'm hungry, that's my problem. I have a ribeye, it's delicious. Now I can eat it, it's gone, but I'm no longer hungry. Problem solved. Right? Consumption is the destruction of scarce resources in order to solve our problems. The big question is, how do we get the consumption goods? Because most things you cannot eat by itself. Try eating a cow. Like, it's not so delicious, it's very hairy, it runs away, you know. The cow itself is not the thing to eat. The cow is a production good, right? And so we have consumption goods, which are the things that actually solve our problems. And then we have the good that produced the production good, you know. We had a large cut of picanha, you know, that's a production good where you can, you know, slice off one nice steak. But that's still not the final thing, unless you like tartar. But, you know, then we need another machine, the grill, to start frying it, get it nicely rare, in my taste, and then we can eat it, right? We also need some fork and knife. Oh, we could do barbaric, but it's kind of nicer to cut something. So these are all tools that we need in order to further the production stages. But it doesn't stop there, right? We need to have a butcher, you know, that takes the carcass and cuts it into the individual pieces. We need the butcher to kill the animal, right? We need the farmer to raise the cow. We need to have the hay that grows, the grass that the cow eats. We need to have, I don't know, the diesel for the tractor that prepares the farmland. We need to have the metals that produce the engines that produce the tractor. Right? So as you can see here, we have production stages that continue going ad infinitum, basically, all the way until raw resources. Right? And for each of these raw materials, we need to allocate our time and work on the raw material to further its production stages. Right? Raw material is the soil on the ground. One machine, a tool, is a shovel. Now we got to dig a hole to get the iron ore, to produce the steel, to produce the engine block, to produce the tractor, to produce the grass, to produce the cow, to produce the steak, to produce the final cooked dinner on my plate that I can eat and solve my problem. These are production stages of higher order goods and lower order goods. Lower order goods are the consumption goods. And what's interesting here is that we have a specificity of the production of the production materials. A bar of steel is a very general good. We can use it to build beams, to build a house, to produce a wrench, to produce an engine block. Right? One general type of production good can be specialized into different type of specific production goods. And if we allocate our time and resources to change the general production good to a specific production good, this is kind of a one-way street. Right? If you have an engine block, you can no longer build a house with it. So you've removed the ability of the good to solve a whole bunch of problems in order to be specialized at the one problem that really needs to be solved. And so this very much applies to privacy and cryptography. Right? The end good that we want is, I don't know, secure communications. Right? I want to be able to tell you a secret without the middleman knowing about it. That's a pretty close to a consumption good. Right? Might not be the actual consumption, right? Maybe there's something else after that, but ultimately that's what I want. And so in order to use that, right, I need to have a computer, right? That's already a production good in the sense it's not a thing that I consume. The electricity would be consumed, right? But the hardware stays around. And then I need a software program. It has a user front end, right? It needs to be intuitive and so on. That's a further production stage, a little bit higher up. Then I need to have the cryptographic library that's implementing the cryptographic system. Right? Again, one step higher. Then I need the cryptographic protocol that puts together all of the different aspects of the math to make sure that we have a secure encryption system. And then I need the cryptographic primitives, right? Foundational cryptographic research, mathematics, like deep theoretical mathematics. Right? So for any privacy good, we have production stages that we need to allocate our time and resources in order to build the final good that we need. And that's deeply like an economic entrepreneurial task. And to come back to the paper of Anonymity Loves Company, deeper production stages are incredibly valuable because they affect all the later production stages all the way to the consumer good. That's why protocol researchers, or even the theoretical cryptographers, etc., are heroes of our industry because they fix problems for all of us that come downstream. Right? The library implementer doesn't need to know about the deeps of theoretic cryptography. He just needs to implement exactly what's in spec. That's of course very difficult still, and so on, but once we have the library built, the guy who writes the user interface doesn't need to know anything about the math at all. He just calls the function of the library. And so to specialize, especially in the higher order of production stages, is incredibly valuable. And so massive shout out to all the theoretical cryptographers here in the room and the protocol designers. Very, very valuable work, and please keep doing it. But of course, it's not the only thing, right? Because a production good is in a limbo. Like, production goods don't actually solve our problems. They're the tools that we use to solve our problems. So also shout out to all the UX designers and so on that actually make the pretty user interfaces. We're all needed. That's the cool thing about economics. Everyone has a task, everyone has a purpose, and we'll just continue building cool stuff, right? Yeah, so this is ultimately what entrepreneurship is about, right? To allocate your scarce resources with the assumption that there will be problems in the uncertain future that you can fix by applying your time, your attention, your scarce resources, your skills, the knowledge that you've accumulated in order to produce these things. Information is a required production good. You could be on a lonely island and you have all the raw materials, all of the production goods, all the machinery, all the engines, all the fuel. You have everything available nicely in front of you, you can use it all, but you have no idea about how to screw a screw, how to start a fire, right? How to fuel a car. If you don't have the information about how to apply your scarce resources, you will not be able to solve your problem. Information is a required production good. Information is a good, by the way. A good is something that helps us solve our problems. A bad is something that prevents us from solving our problems. Like a pile of shit on your doorstep is not a thing that helps you, it's a thing that you don't like. That's why it's trash, right? We want to get rid of it. And so that's, again, to get back to the beauty of information. Information is a non-scarce resource, right? A non-scarce good. It's something that we need, something that we want. But the beautiful thing is, we can just have it all, right? We can all use the Bitcoin source code. There's no requirement that we have to be stingy and you get it, but you don't. No, anyone can have it. That's why we do free software, right? And the idea of having intellectual property it's so stupid, it's incredible. Like, we have this gift of God where we can just solve all of our problems for free and we can all do it at the same time and there's no conflict whatsoever. But then the guy says, no, actually, these are my patterns. These are my words. I own the number 21. Like, you're not allowed to have 21. No, this is mine, right? All of a sudden, we're introducing a conflict to where none existed. That's crazy. And so, first of all, that adds a whole bunch of friction. Second of all, now you start stealing actually scarce resources. Like, if I tell you the pattern of the words that's in my book, these are mine. If you print them on your own paper, you steal from me. And I get to hurt you and I get to take your paper away. You didn't take anything from me. I still have the exact pattern of the words. But I took your book. I took the ink. I took your time that was used to produce the book. Those are the scarce resources that are being stolen if we introduce property rights in non-scarce resources. That's why patents and copyrights are so utter nonsense. Not only do they take away the free information that we all have a right to, but further, it takes away the scarce resources where there is actually a conflict, and it introduces an additional conflict, right? Now I have the legal right to take away your paper, where your actual legal right would be to keep the things that you've produced yourself. Right? So that's why my book is published in the public domain. If you want to print it, please do, then I don't have to print it. It's expensive to print stuff. So like, take it, make a movie. I'd love to see it. So let's get a little bit more into monetary theory. By the way, again, questions. We have like 5 minutes. Monetary theory. Why is money so important? I guess first of all, what is money in the first place? Money is the most liquid medium of exchange. A medium of exchange is a good that is neither a consumption good nor a production good. Right? A consumption good you destroy in order to solve your problem. Your production good you destroy in order to create a consumption good. But a money, a medium of exchange, does not get destroyed. We still have gold coins from like thousands of years ago. They're still around. Right? We value them not for the direct pleasure of consuming it. We don't value them because we can build a house out of gold. We value it because we know that everyone else on the market will solve our problems if we trade him the gold for it. Right? Money is that good that everyone else wants. And the good that you can buy anything for a very little premium price. I'm sure you can buy a house for bananas, given enough bananas. Right? But the value of those bananas will be way higher. The price of these bananas that you need to offer in trade will be, I don't know, 100 times higher than if you would just give gold. Because what am I going to do with all these bananas? Right? Now I need to worry about selling them to consumers and getting the actual thing that I want. If I get the medium of exchange, I know that I can get with one hop whatever else I want because everyone else wants to have this. So the cost for the receiver of the payment to then continue buying the goods and services that he wants is very low. That's why money is an efficiency improvement. It decreases the loss of trade, right? And improves and removes the friction of trade. That's why we use the money, ultimately. And so there's some aspects of better or worse monies. A money that decays is a bad money. Bananas, right? After a week or so, they're black and no longer that good. After a couple months, they're all moldy and nobody will want them. So if you want to save your capital in a non-durable good, it will literally be destroyed. That's why we use gold as money. Because the gold that was produced 1,000 years ago is still perfectly fine today. Right? That's why hopefully Bitcoin is a good money, because in 100 years it will still be here. It's quite difficult to do, but let's hope we can pull it off. That's the first aspect, right? Durability. But also, we want to be easily able to transact it. Again, money is a medium of exchange. It's there to be transacted. So it should be, light enough that we can move it back and forth. That's why gold was a bad money, because try moving a couple tons of gold. It's really, really, really difficult and requires a lot of fuel, right? To just move the tank that moves it. We also want that money cannot be stolen easily, right? If it's easy to steal your money, that's not really good money. Again, the whole art of economics is how to prevent theft, ultimately. And so if you have a money that's easily stolen, that sucks. Again, why gold is a bad form of money, because it's so expensive to move and so visible when you move it that it's easy to intercept it en route to the trade. That's why, Bitcoin is a very good money, because it's really damn hard to steal. Because we have private public key cryptography that protects it, and signatures cannot be forged, private keys can be memorized or hidden very easily. So these are some of the good aspects of money, and that's, to bring this finally back to privacy, that's why anonymous money has value. Because anonymity is a strategy and a tool to increase the cost of attack. Right? An anonymous money is harder to steal than a surveilled money. That's why Bitcoin needs to be private. There have been countless cases where guys were doing a peer-to-peer trade. He sold 0.1 Bitcoin. A couple days later, guy with a $5 rent shows up because he looked at the blockchain and saw that the input was 100 Bitcoin. Right? We don't have sender privacy on the Bitcoin base layer. That's insanely dangerous. People die because of this. 2 minutes. Yeah, question?
Maybe this is like for after, but thanks. I was wondering because you're discussing this from the first principle basis, what you would feel is the best solution for privacy on Bitcoin derived from what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the best solution would be to just hard fork the shit out of it and make it fundamentally better, but that's hard. CoinJoin is a great solution where we don't need to hard fork or soft fork, or in other words, we already did the soft forks required in order to do CoinJoins. Same with the Lightning Network, that's a coin swap network. Ultimately, I'm insanely bullish on shielded client-side validation. That's, I think, the best anonymous money system, digital money system that we've designed so far. But yeah, that's the gist of it. Again, the second part, so what I just talked about is like the first part of the book. The second half of the book is about how do we make that happen. That's where all the cypherpunk stuff comes in that you all know about, so I didn't much talk about it here. One final thing on privacy. Why does it prevent theft? Because it breaks the OODA loop at observation. The OODA loop is a term from military strategy by a guy named Boyd. He was a jet pilot fighter. And he realized that when two agents are fighting each other, both are cycling through this loop. Of first, they have to observe the other person. Then you have to orient yourself in relation to the other person. Then you have to decide what is your next course of action. What do you do with the other person or to the other person? And finally, you have to act and execute the plan that you've made. Observe, orient, decide, act. OODA. Right? The beauty of the cypherpunks is that they've realized that if we break this loop of the adversary at observation, we break it at the earliest possible convenience. If the adversary doesn't know who you are, where you are, how much money you have, where you keep it, how is he going to take your money away? And that's exactly why the cypherpunks have been so on about the privacy all the time. Because it makes theft impossible. If you're anonymous, theft is not possible. And we already know, because of the economic logic, that theft is really stupid and really bad. And we should do our best to make theft impossible. That was the conclusions of the Austrians. And then the cypherpunks are like, yes, and here's exactly how we do it. So thanks very much to all the Austrians to come up with this theory. And especially thank you very much to all the cypherpunks who've made the implementation possible. And I guess thank you for listening. And if you're interested, get the book. It's available for free towards liberty.com/pop. If you want to get a signed copy, it's over there. I have many copies. I hate carrying them, so I don't ask for I don't want to get rich of this, I just want to carry less books. And if you're going to Oslo after this, and you want to carry the books instead, then please let me know as well. Thank you very much.